Hello and welcome to this second lesson in the Year 7 unit looking at computer systems. Before we start today, there are 3 questions on the screen which I'd like you to consider. Number 1, what does the word architecture mean? That may be a word you've heard of before. Think about that in a general context. What does the word architecture mean? Then, what might a computer's architecture be? And finally, have you heard of any parts that might make up a computer's architecture? What computer bits have you heard of? Pause the video at this point, have a think about those 3 and move on when you're ready. So as I said, this is the second lesson in the Year 7 Computer Systems unit, and today, funnily enough, we are going to be looking at the computer architecture. By the end of this lesson, you will understand what the term computer architecture means. You'll begin to understand the various components that make up a computer architecture, and you'll better remember those using a model called Archie. So the word architecture means a complex or carefully designed structure of something, and you'll probably have heard of the word architecture when it comes to buildings. That's all about how a building is designed, what different components make up that building. A computer's architecture is the design of the components used to make the computer work. If you took the side of your computer case off, what different bits will you find inside? And that's what we're going to look at today. So the architecture is simply the components that make up the computer. Now, in Key Stage 3, we use a character called Archie to represent the computer architecture, and we're going to be using an Archie character today. Now, your Archie character needs to have a head, 2 arms, and 2 legs, all of which are visible. So the character on the left and the character on the right would absolutely work. Bart Simpson in the middle wouldn't really work because his right arm is not really visible. So you've got 2 options here in a moment. I want you to go and either find a character like that on the computer and copy and paste it into an A4 page, or draw one into an A4 page in your book. So we'll pause the video at this point. I'd like you, as I said on the previous slide, to either draw an Archie character or to find an Archie that takes up the whole page in, say, Microsoft Word. It's really important, though, that your character has got hands, feet, head, and ideally a hat on them as well. And you can add the hat manually if you want to draw that on instead. Pause the video at this point and restart once you've got your character ready to go. So, Archie's head is used to represent the CPU, and the CPU is the central processing unit, and that is the brain of the computer. So just like us, the computer has got a brain, and we represent that using Archie's head. The CPU, or the brain, undertakes the processing by doing millions or billions of calculations every second to make the computer work really, really fast. So sometimes you'll see on TV adverts for laptops in PC World or Currys, and they'll say that the computer is 2.3 gigahertz. That means that computer's brain can do 2.3 billion calculations every second. So Archie's head is the CPU. I'd like you to pause the video at this point, and I'd like you to label Archie's head, so label a text box or a box in your book coming off of Archie's head, and in that explain what the CPU is. Now to do that, you'll look at the previous slide. You might also want to jump onto the internet to expand up your definition. If you go onto BBC Bitesize, you'll find a page that says what is the CPU, and you'll get that in a lot more detail than we've just looked at. If you finish, there's a little extension task at the bottom that might ask you to do a little bit of shopping around how much does a CPU cost. So pause the video at this point, give yourself about 10 minutes and see if you can label Archie's head, your character's head, in as much detail as you can, all about what the CPU is. Archie's right arm is then something called the RAM, or the Random Access Memory. And the RAM is super fast storage that we use to store all of the calculations that the CPU is doing. If we think about the CPU doing maybe 1 billion calculations in a second, that means we're going to have 1 billion answers every second, and we need to store those answers somewhere, and that somewhere is the RAM. And the RAM stores data as pulses of electricity. So the information held in the RAM is only there while the computer is switched on. If the computer is switched off, the RAM is wiped and everything that was in the RAM is lost. So Archie's right arm is the RAM, the random access memory, super fast storage that we use to save the results of calculations, but that is lost whenever we turn the computer off. Again, I'd like you to pause the video at this point and now add a box around Archie's right arm. And in that box, I'd like you to explain as much about the RAM as you can. Just like before, use the previous slide, but I'd also like you to jump onto maybe BBC Bitesize or another website to find a little bit more information if you can. As always, there's an extension at the bottom. If you're finished early, have a look at that one as well. Give yourself another 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes' time, you should have the head fully labelled, plus then Archie's right arm. Archie's other arm, his left arm, is for the graphics card, and the graphics card is used to convert the electrical signals that are flying around inside the computer into something we can see. They basically make the picture that comes up on your screen. So the quality of the graphics card defines the quality of the image you will see, the frames per second rate, the refresh rate, and how many colours your screen will be able to display. If we were building a games console, we'd want a really, really good graphics card. If we were creating a PC to work in an office that would only ever use Microsoft Word, the graphics card wouldn't be all that important. Therefore, graphics cards range massively in price, everything from about £20 to about £2,000. So the graphics card takes our electrical signals and converts those into a picture so we can see what's going on our screen. You're probably getting the drill by now. I'd like you to pause the video at this point and label Archie's left arm. I'd like you to label it as graphics card and then explain in as much detail as you can what the graphics card is. Use the internet where you need to expand your definition and have a go at the extension task if you finish early. You've got about another 10 minutes. Pause the video at this point and have a go at the graphics card or Archie's left arm. We're now down onto Archie's legs and we're looking to start with our Archie's left leg. Now we said earlier that the RAM memory stored the results of the calculations. It stored all of the things that were going on in the computer at that one moment. But when the electricity is switched off or the computer's shut down, we lose everything in the RAM. Archie's left leg is where we store our work in the long term and it represents the storage devices. Now you might have heard of something called a hard drive. The hard drive is where your work goes when you go File, Save As. It moves from the RAM memory into the hard drive. Now the hard drive is much slower, but it will store the information even when the computer's powered off. It means you can do some work today, open it up again tomorrow, and the work will still be there. So Archie's left leg are our storage devices. Those are our devices that save all of our work and allow us to install an application today and it still be there tomorrow. So we're at another activity. If you pause the video, give yourself about 10 minutes. I'd like you to label Archie's left leg, label it as storage device, and then go on and find as much information about storage devices or hard drives as you can. As always, there's an extension at the bottom if you're finished early. Give yourself about 10 minutes. And we're on to the last part of Archie, Archie's right leg. Archie's right leg is used to represent the input and output devices. Now, the previous lesson looked at input and output devices in lots of detail, and the previous lesson in this series, the previous video in this series, shows that. I'm therefore not going to go into any more detail here. I'd like you to look back at your notes from last lesson and outline what are input devices and what are output devices, and then label those as Archie's right leg. So pause the video at this point, have a go at the right leg, and then recap your answers using your notes from last lesson. So here is a half-finished version of Archie. This is a really good one. We've got a nice Archie character, and then we've got some basic detail coming off of most of Archie's limbs, with the right leg still to do. Hopefully your page now looks something like this, and you've got your Archie character with a range of research and notes next to it to help you remember what the different parts of the computer architecture are used for. Now, if yours looks like that, brilliant. If you don't think yours does yet, pause this video, go back and have another look at any areas you might be able to add in some more detail. So hopefully we're at a point where we've now met our 3 objectives for this lesson. You hopefully understand what the term computer architecture means. You're beginning to understand the different components that make up a computer, and you're able to remember some of those using our Archie character to explain what each one does. Now, if you think you can tick those off, brilliant. If not, feel free to pause the video, rewind, and go back and have a look at any parts you think you need to add some detail to. If you've got any questions, please post those either in the comments section below or onto your class in Google Classroom for your teacher to have a look at. Thank you very much for watching.